Another major Obamacare screw-up, and it could keep almost 1 million of you from getting your tax refund on time. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. It is a mistake so bad the Obama administration could not wait until after 5 p.m. on a Friday to tell you about it. The government said this morning it sent almost 1 million Obamacare subscribers the wrong tax information. That means delays in filing and delays in getting desperately needed tax refunds. Obamacare is already providing a much more complicated tax season for millions of Americans. Correspondent Peter Ducey is here with tonight's top story about a disturbing bottom line.
HHS, we have a problem. 800,000 healthcare.gov customers were sent faulty forms with tax figures representing this year's premiums instead of last year's. How did this happen? One official says, quote, "We are looking into it." As the feds investigate, those affected now being told to wait and delay filing taxes until they receive the right numbers.
Even if you fix the glitches and the mistakes, the thing is still going to be an administrative nightmare, and it's going to drive people crazy at tax time.
Republicans are pouncing. Congresswoman Diane Black calling this, quote, "a classic Friday news dump." Senator John Barrasso says the administration has, quote, "added to its record of incompetence." And Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn says, quote, "Surprise, surprise, the Obama administration still does not have its act together." This seems like a big problem, but White House officials insist that in the big picture, not a big deal.
It's a small percentage of overall tax filers. We're talking about less than 1% of people who file taxes.
At a DNC meeting this morning, President Obama bragged about the strength of this year's enrollment statistics.
We've extended the security and fundamental right to affordable, accessible health care to more than 10 million uninsured Americans.
But what a difference 3 days make, because that 10 million figure is significantly smaller than the one he used on Tuesday.
11.4 million people have either re-enrolled or enrolled for the first time.
We also learned today that the February 15th deadline to enroll for coverage wasn't much of a deadline, because there will now be a 6-week-long special enrollment period in March and April, as new analysis from the Urban Institute reveals 4 in 10 uninsured Americans still don't realize that if they fail to sign up for coverage, they must pay a penalty.
So this is trying to give them another shot at avoiding a penalty for the second year. It doesn't fix the penalty for the first year.
These are just the latest pair of problems in the error-plagued rollout of the Affordable Care Act, and bring forward the feeling that Yogi Berra talked about, deja vu all over again. Brett?
All right, more on this with the panel. Peter, thank you. This is a Fox News alert just a day after the conclusion of a White House summit countering violent extremism, in which the term Islamic extremist or terrorist was not invoked. The Obama administration is naming right-wing domestic groups as a significant terrorism threat inside the U.S. The Homeland Security Department intelligence assessment, released late today, focuses on what are called sovereign citizen extremists. They reject the authority of the federal government and the courts. It says there have been 24 attacks involving so-called SCEs since 2010. The report warns that law enforcement officers are the primary targets during occasions such as traffic stops and encounters at a suspect's home. The other shoe has fallen in the legal battle over President Obama's executive action on immigration. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry is here tonight with the administration's aggressive new response to a big setback.
Aides to President Obama revealed late today he'll seek an emergency court order to push forward with his executive actions on immigration despite a Texas judge's ruling on a day the president used the issue to try and fire up the faithful at the Democratic National Committee's winter meetings.
And stop trying to deport millions of striving young kids who just want to earn their shot at the American dream like the rest of us. Help us fix a broken immigration system.
in addition to working on a previously disclosed appeal of U.S. District Judge Andrew Hanen's ruling. Spokesman Josh Earnest said in a new move, the administration will file a stay of the judge's injunction by Monday. If the stay is granted, the president would have the option of going forward with work permits for millions of illegal immigrants while the case is worked out.
Once we have taken some additional steps through this legal process, we may be in a position to give you an update about the status of implementing the program.
A shift from what the president said just this past Tuesday, vowing he would not go forward with work permits until the entire case was resolved.
You know, the law is the law in this country, and we take things a step at a time. So we're not going to be actually taking applications in until this case is settled. But we are doing the preparatory work because this is a big piece of business.
That preparatory work may give the president a chance to pivot out of a difficult week, which ended with ISIS claiming responsibility for 3 simultaneous car bomb explosions in Libya, killing at least 45 people, just after the president finished a 3-day summit on countering violent extremism, which Republicans charged was light on actually countering extremism.
It was a bit of a psychotherapy session without any substance or any solutions that came out of it, and the FBI wasn't even invited to speak, and the military took a back seat.
Earnest defended the decision not to include FBI Director James Comey by saying, in part, they did not want the focus to be too much on law enforcement.
Were you tiptoeing around not offending Muslims, or is there some reason why the summit was largely about just not offending Muslims for some reason?
Yeah, I certainly don't think that's the way that anybody here would characterize the summit. I think this was an opportunity for us to have a very frank discussion.
Now, on immigration, there are also signs that that administration officials may hold back on work permits, even if they win this early round in court. They don't want to give immigrants false hope until they've got this case fully resolved. Brett?
Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton is making a point on social media this afternoon. Some call it trolling on Twitter. The State Department asked for input on countering violent extremism. Well, Senator Cotton then shared some ideas, probably a little more direct than the State Department was looking for, such as pictures of special forces, the A-10 Warthog, forward air controllers, a B-2 bomber, Navy SEALs, and a Tomahawk strike. Governors from all over the country are in Washington tonight for their winter meeting, and that is providing very fertile ground for several governors who are looking at a job upgrade in 2016. Chief political correspondent Carl Cameron looks at a weekend filled with presidential posturing.
President Obama addresses the National Governors Association Conference in Washington Sunday, and 4 GOP governors positioning for 2016 presidential bids will be on hand, hoping to showcase and contrast their home state leadership records. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker comes amid controversy and protests back home over his proposed $300 million cut to the University of Wisconsin's $6 billion overall operating budget. Now add to that a new expedited push to pass and sign statewide right-to-work legislation as soon as next week. Democrats call both moves political stunts to run for president, and conservatives are taking notice and expressing approval. Ohio Governor John Kasich will be a no-show at the Governor's Conference. In South Carolina this week, he dismissed conservative criticism in his state of the controversial national education standards known as Common Core, saying, quote, "It's local school boards developing local curriculum to meet higher standards. I cannot figure out what's wrong with that," and referring to the opposition said, "To a large degree, it's a runaway internet campaign as far as I'm concerned in Ohio." That aligns Kasich with former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, whose staunch defense of Common Core has turned off conservatives who think Common Core amounts to a federal takeover of local education.
Common Core is one of the litmus tests for conservatives who dominate the Republican nominating process. Many activists fear that over time the federal government is absorbing more of the decision-making authority, leaving less for states and localities.
Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, where Common Core has been in place for years, complained on a recent trip to Iowa that President Obama has corrupted the voluntary program by granting states federal dollars for replacing their own standards with national ones.
I have grave concerns about the way this has been done, and especially the way the Obama administration has tried to implement it through timed federal funding to these things.
Indiana Governor Mike Pence thrilled grassroots education conservatives last year by curtailing Common Core in the Hoosier state. Since then, however, conservatives have grumbled that the replacement standards are second-rate and not that different. Governor Pence appears on Fox News Sunday this weekend.
GOP governors have plenty of beefs with the president: foreign policy, ISIS, ObamaCare, and his executive action on immigration, just to name a few, Brett.
All right, Carl, thank you. We will take an in-depth look at the presidential race on the Democratic side of the ticket this weekend. Fox News reporting the Democrats' Coronation or Confrontation airs over the weekend. One of the possible contenders is former Virginia Senator Jim Webb. You said a few weeks ago the Democratic Party has lost its way. What did you mean by that?
The people who have no voice in the corridors of power could always count on the Democratic Party to be talking about economic fairness issues particularly. And it's kind of up for grabs these days. I think the Democratic Party needs to get back on that message.
Fox News reporting the Democrats' Coronation or Confrontation premieres Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern. Up next, desperate efforts to try to revive a so far ineffective ceasefire in Ukraine. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in New York, where it's so cold upstate that Niagara Falls has partially frozen. Temperatures as low as 13 below zero have led to a massive ice buildup near the brink. Water does keep flowing there, but below the ice cover. WRLH in Richmond, where Virginia's former First Lady is going to prison. Maureen McDonald was sentenced today to 1 year and 1 day for her role in a bribery scheme that destroyed her husband's political career. Last month, former Governor Bob McDonnell was sentenced to 2 years in prison. And this is a live look at Los Angeles from our affiliate out there, Fox 11. The big story there tonight is the latest effort to get pro football back to L.A. Officials in Carson want to build a $1.7 billion stadium that would be used by the Oakland Raiders and the San Diego Chargers. Both teams are trying to get new stadiums in their current cities. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.